Is the beef industry cool? Currently, it's not, but soon it might. Today, we discuss the legislative bill introduced to the United States Senate to ensure you know exactly where your meat comes from. Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen. With me is my father, Brandon. If this is your first time seeing our faces, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. You can also find us at the social media links below. Today, we talk about cool. First, though, what is cool? Actually, it's MCOOL, MCOOL, and that is an acronym that stands for Mandatory Country of Origin Labeling. United States Senators John Tester, a Democrat from Montana, John Thune, a Republican from South Dakota, Mike Rounds, the other Republican from South Dakota, and then Cory Booker, a Democrat from New Jersey, announced the American Beef Labeling Act, which will be introduced on 13 September, which is actually tomorrow. But by the time this comes out, it will have been this past week. This will require retail sellers to accurately reflect where consumers' beef originates. However, it is stated that the law must be World Trade Organization compliant.
There you go.
What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to read the bill because really I've looked at it. It's really an amendment to the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946. But with that, the law originally existed, but it was then repealed in December of 2015 due to trade issues directed from the World Trade Organization. COOL was originally determined to be a non-tariff trade barrier and stated Mexico and Canada could use retaliatory tariffs if U.S. products were sold in those countries. And you can probably bet your bottom britches that came from NAFTA. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some Twitter stuff that I have actually queued up and ready to go. And I will share them with you. It's from a guy named Adam Jones, and he's from Kansas, and he's got some really good stuff. But I'm going to just share some tweets with you because I think it's important. And here it is. His first one. Did you know the United States imports beef from Costa Rica? Probably not, since we do not have mandatory country of origin labeling. And we'll go up a little bit here. Did you know the United States imports beef from Argentina? Probably not, since we do not have mandatory country of origin labeling. Did you know the United States imports from Uruguay, from Nicaragua, from Brazil? And he said in here, a little hard on the rainforest while we're at it. United States, did you know it imports from Australia? Did you know it imports beef from New Zealand? Now here's another one. Did you know the United States imports beef from Canada and Mexico? You probably did. But since we do not have mandatory country of origin labeling, the amount might surprise you. Between June and January of this year, the first 6 months, Canada, I'm going to go with poundage. He didn't label it, but I'm going to guess it's poundage. Canada brought in 440,186,925, I think, pounds of beef. Mexico, 318,105,645. That does not include live cattle. That's all carcass weight, based off what I'm assuming here. Did you know the United States imports beef from Ireland, Netherlands, Japan, Chile, France, Poland, Honduras, Croatia, Spain, and Lithuania? Probably not, because we don't have mandatory country of origin labeling. Another couple ones in here. Did you know the United States imported 3,342,203,920 pounds of beef in 2020? Of course you didn't. The next one. The United States has imported 902,129 head of live cattle as of June 2021. This is another reason we need MCOOL. Perspective. Mississippi has a few more at 930,000 cattle. Utah, a few less at around 800,000. So I'm going to stop with that one, but then I'll share this final tweet that he gave out. Senator Booker, we've discussed him on this channel multiple times, is a vegan. What he says on here, Senator Booker has been very clear on his personal and political thoughts. I appreciate his supporting this bill. What makes me nervous is senators that claim to represent cattle producers but fail to co-sponsor this legislation. They are wolves. And with that, I will turn it over to Dad.
Well, you missed one. Namibia.
Namibia, yeah.
Namibia imported in April of 2020 for the first time, I believe it was 2,500 tons of beef. Namibia. You want to buy African beef?
Probably not.
Hell, you want to buy middle American,
I
Central American beef.
I frankly
Some
don't
of
want to
it-
buy beef from really anywhere else other than the United States
There you go.
because again, my thoughts on that are we should be exporting. Now, I get it. It's supposed to be trade and stuff like
Right.
that, but
Well,
yeah,
here,
no.
but here's the problem. When you got guys like Cory Booker, who wants to put the beef industry out of business, he's stated such,
Mhm.
and he's onto a bill with our Montana Democratic Socialist Senator Tester. What has Tester got into this as well? The same things that Booker does. It's about taking money, payoffs. It is about, and this is alleged because I don't know that. I'm not standing in the room when it happens.
Mhm.
But any of the country of origin labeling that we've had before has been ineffective. The WTO is for the WTO. You're talking about United Nations type of crap, and they have made those laws when they were in, before they were repealed in 15, where all it had to do was cross the border in a box, and as long as it was then cut into pieces for consumption here, they called it American beef. It clearly wasn't. So this is nothing more, I think, again, than a damn smokescreen of, hey, look what we're doing for the American farmers and ranchers, and they're not doing a thing.
Well, it has to pass stuff first anyway. It's getting introduced this week.
Yeah, well, good luck stopping that with the current climate that you've got.
Yeah. The other thing too is really the whole point of this particular episode is really to explain why we need country of origin labeling. Now, I think you're absolutely right to pull something across the border and then cut it in the United States. That's not American beef.
Nope.
But I have some things labeled here. But I'll start with the first one. Actually, before I even get to that, one Canadian guy that I follow on Twitter said, "Hey, the Americans are at it again. They're trying to do country of origin labeling." And my first thought was, why are you against it? I literally tweeted this. I don't have it readily available, so I'm not going to say what my verbiage specifically was, but it was along the lines of, why are you so against this? I think no matter what country it comes from, you should know where your food comes, like where it originates. Why are you against that bill? Like that, I don't see the problem. And I've had quite a few people like that tweet, because whether it's Canadian beef or Mexican beef or Russian beef, I don't care where it's from. I just think it's important to know we already make made in USA products and made in Taiwan, made in China. We know where things come from. So why not know the same thing about your food? I think that's a very relevant question to ask.
It is a relevant question. It's also relevant to note that our cattle markets were shut down for quite a while because of a dairy beef that was brought into the state of Washington with mad cow disease a number of years ago. And guess where it came from?
Canada.
Canada.
Right? Yeah.
Canada. So those
and Brazil's had that too, by the way. Brazil is still
just
importing.
Lately.
Yeah, they've been importing. I threw out the numbers. Let me go back to it again real quick. Those guys just got cases of mad cow. I think 3 so far. And in here, what did he say? It comes from Brazil. Brazil. They he didn't say the amount. Dang it. But yeah, we still import from Brazil. And
guess what they stopped importing to?
Where?
China. China refused to take
right.
their meat. China refused to take their meat from Brazil when they found they had mad cow disease, which is a responsible thing to do. Did the U.S.? Hell no.
And that's where I get irritated too, is like we did that for years. I remember when it was finally okay, now we can start sending stuff to Canada because mad cow, the like 20-year quarantine is over. Like
that came off from them. Yeah.
I was like, you guys can now return to Canada with your beef. And that was such a big deal for everybody. We're like, hey, cattle prices are going to probably increase. Like, I just remember it being a big deal. And now we won't do the same thing to another country. Like, I don't, the double-edged sword there, like you're holding a standard to everybody else but yourself. And it's in the wrong way altogether.
Huh. Geez, big surprise. The ineptitude of our government officials is astounding, and it just keeps getting more and more wild. And it's like, Jesus, can you not do anything that will actually benefit the U.S.? I mean,
I don't know. Like I'm trying to really focus on just the labeling part, but I know.
Well, here's the problem. Well, here's where I'm headed with this. What is the purpose of the labeling, really? Ultimately, it's our safety in our food supply.
Yeah, well, and especially we've talked about this multiple times, especially with when it comes to like plant-based protein. That's what they call it, fake meat. When they talk about fake meat, I have always said you should know what your food is, and having more processed food is not healthy for you. So this is the same thing, just with meat. Okay, has it been injected with steroids, with antibiotics within, a certain amount of time before the kill date? All these things that other countries may or may not actually follow, the regulations that we utilize, and we make sure that we abide by them, but we won't hold that standard to others. And then on top of that, the labeling helps delineate, oh, I those guys are kind of sketchy with their food, so maybe I don't want to buy what they have to do,
or import it,
or yeah.
So that's really the biggest thing. We've touted for years how we have the safest food supply on the planet, and we do. But when you start doing things like that, you can no longer say that, not with a straight face, and so what are we trying to do? We're trying to dumb down the same old thing. Let's not make someone have a higher standard or meet our high standard to be able to do what we do. Let's just make sure that everybody's food supply has crap in it. Yeah. Then we're all the same. And that is just reeks of the WTO.
Which that part frustrates me too, because really, as technology increases, as our world in a weird way becomes smaller, because we're able to travel places easier, we're able to communicate. I know what is happening the opposite side of the planet from where I am right now within seconds. If I look it up, if I go, we are able to report everything digitally so quickly that we get articles within 6 minutes, and we're like, oh wow, okay, so this is what's going on. But I don't understand why, if we're going to have world organizations like the WTO, the United Nations, anything else like that, why can we not then add this sounds horrible, being a small government guy, I'm about to add something that's big government here. Why can't you, as a World Trade Organization, supplement or promote that healthy living with that healthy food supply chain and whatnot in Brazil? Why can't you go down there and help them? Hey, this is what has worked in first world countries, United States, UK, France, whatever. This works there. Why don't we try to implement that here? And that's what I'm saying. Like, why do they not do that and try and bring the lower guy up rather than dropping all of us down?
Well, and it isn't necessarily that it's the WTO, for instance, that would do that. That those governments need to do that themselves. It's self-regulate this. You don't have to or rely on some entity to do it. Everybody does it. Everybody does their own. You can see an outbreak of some, I don't care what it is, disease or potential disease, you stop it right there. Here's the problem. How much money does Brazil give to the WTO, their officials? And this is how cynical I am, because it's the same old thing and has been. Who's getting their palm greased in order to keep those borders open? What would happen if Brazilian beef was stopped like it was in the US for 20 years?
It would probably make their entire economy crumble, frankly.
Oh, we can't have that, can we?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, it's not like it's already crumbling on its own. The Rio Olympics showed that.
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yes, that's a good example.
Because I mean, that was the whole thing, was Rio was gonna help bring money in as an influx, and then what happened was, as soon as the Olympics left, it all just crumbled, and it's a skeleton of an infrastructure that's not ever being used again.
And where'd all that money end up?
Oh, probably warlords.
I'm asking rhetorically. Yeah, I mean,
legitimately, probably warlords or drug cartels and stuff in Brazil. Yeah, I would imagine, but it's just I agree with you. I think that is the right answer. Instead of making more things, it's hold them accountable. But the problem is we won't do that as a world. It's very
well, we won't do that within our own country.
Also true.
Yeah. I mean, and a good example of that is our border right now. You got people coming across, there's no health inspections. Nothing's being done with illegal people coming across the border. We're enabling it and green stamping it so it happens quicker. Now, that's just the people part of that. Your food supply is going to be more and more strained because of the very same thing. And you know what? People are going to go, I'm not touching that.
Right.
If they have half an idea, of course, these are the same people that'll buy a hot dog, which, who knows what's in that too. But so it's about keeping the populace really in the dark, because you're right. How many people do know? You named off all of those countries where we have imports coming into from those countries. Right. And how many people really know that? Few. You're right.
I don't know where he got that information from. I have absolutely no doubt that it is correct, because the stuff I've talked to this guy, he's very knowledgeable. He's very on top of things when it comes to this stuff, but I don't know where he got it from. I would love to know the
sourcing would be really good.
Yeah.
And it may be our own very own trade
reports or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like the next point I was gonna bring up, because I talked about my tweet. I was simply asking why I think every nation in the world should know where its food comes from. If you get coffee from Colombia, okay, cool. If you get coffee, or if you get wheat from, I don't know, South Africa, or a zebra from South Africa, I don't care. You should just know where the food comes from, because this leads to my next point. We do that with clothing. Like literally the tags on your clothes say where it's made and where it was imported from. Like, or sometimes it'll say X percentage of flax or cotton came from here and X percentage came from here and it was made here. And you kind of have a history of the shirt. Literally on the tag, it tells you where the shirt came from, and we won't do that with our food. And it boggles my mind. This is why I'm such a proponent of COOL, because
proponent of COOL, as long as it's done correctly. It's also be just a smokescreen where it does nothing more than enables an imbalance of trade for the benefit of a few, maybe senators, perhaps. I remember when and your uncle, your great uncle, my uncle, had his own truck, trailer, drove, made a decent living at that, and very, very aware of what was going on in our own state. They couldn't get grain into elevators locally. Our trucks were backed up on a lot of these local elevators along the High Line, and Canadian trucks were being allowed in to unload, dumping their grain on our markets. And he called Senator Tester's office, said, "What in the hell is going on here? Why are we allowing all of these Canadian trucks in here into the States, dumping their grain here when we can't even get it done?" And their response is, well, they have to sell their grain too. That was his.
But we should always prioritize our own stuff before.
That's the problem. We don't. And when you have powerful people like Tester, who at every opportunity takes the time and the energy to jump on something that looks really good. What's he done for veterans? Just as a side note,
I've only heard of when he first ran, he talked to veterans.
He always does.
I have only heard him say it maybe 2 or 3 more times, and it's always been roughly 6 months out from re-election.
Yes.
Just gonna say that.
And now he's the head of the Veterans Affairs Committee. Yeah. So yeah, that really helps. But that's my point. He always jumps on something when it's going to make him look good. Now, whether he's running or not, again, I don't know. Who cares? I don't. Some of the people he's associated himself with, which is a big deal for us in the agricultural and forestry industries is Tracy Stone Manning, somebody who worked for him, who's an eco-terrorist. She was part of those that were spiking trees. It's a big deal. Nobody knows about it because the press doesn't pick it up. And he has gone to bat for her multiple times in these confirmation hearings and prior to confirmation hearings, saying this is all just a hoax and how she's being railroaded. And she's the one who was part of this little gang. Some of them went to prison. She turned state's evidence on them in order to save herself. And now she's nominated for the director of the BLM, which directly affects a lot of ground in the nation
for grazing and ground
logging, or not. And we already know where she stands on that. So Tester's usually on the wrong side of something.
The issue, though, specifically when it comes to what the example you brought up with the grain, though, is I think this is the same that goes with the origin of labeling and everything. We should always be promoting, or sorry, I shouldn't say promoting necessarily. We should always be prioritizing our stuff before others. We've had this discussion. While we may not necessarily agree with the fact that we have to import beef and grain and stuff like that, we understand because there's trade deals that occur. In order to get stuff, you have to, it's part of the bartering process. Hey, there's a commodity that you guys can provide that we cannot potentially grow, create, obtain in any way in our homeland. We have to get it from you. But we understand in order to get that, some of the wagering chips, so to speak, are to take so many head of cattle or pork or whatever. And keep in mind, this labeling, it's only for beef, by the way. Sorry if I didn't say that beforehand. This is only for beef. So anybody who's into sheep or into hogs, pork, sorry guys, chicken, you're on your own. That is the one thing I do disagree with this. All about origin of labeling for everything. While I'm a beef guy, I'm not going to just sit here and say it's only for beef. We got what we wanted. No. It should go for everybody.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily mean just because they're putting this bill in. I have not read the bill. I would like to. I need to read the bill because
I'll share it.
Because what are the loopholes in it? The bill doesn't mean anything unless you understand the totality of how it would be implemented.
This is the bill.
Okay.
It's an amendment. This is why I didn't read it. It is literally an amendment. So when you go through this, because I went over it again this morning before getting ready today, it is simply to amend the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946. And the short title is going to be American Beef Labeling Act of 2021. It only says in here exactly what I'm showing you, which is take this term and put it here. Take this term and redesignate it here. No, all this different stuff. It's literally just a word swap, a deletion, and insertion. That's it. Put ground after beef. Like,
so then take ground beef before ground lamb each place it appears.
Yeah,
I see that. So really, it's not going to do anything.
No, and that's the other problem too. Is not only is this not helping other meat producers, but this is not really truly a bill, so to speak. This is simply an amendment. So yeah, it's cool. This is a step forward, but it does nothing to assist in actually getting to the root cause of the problem, like we discussed.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to divide the different agricultural sectors against each other.
Yeah, that's what's happening. That has the potential. If we don't, if other beef producers don't say, hey, we need to get sheep and hogs involved as well, we could very potentially disintegrate ourselves as a whole meat industry. Yeah,
it's a fantastic way to control each sector when you get them to so that they are not united in a similar way for the mutual benefit. Now you get them to fight amongst each other. You don't have to do anything but then just control everything, because it's the same old thing that's going through, whether you're talking racial stuff or urban versus rural. It's the same old thing. So yeah, I'm not surprised. Cory Booker, John Thune, I don't know much about. I've not been impressed with a couple of things I've seen him.
The two Republicans from South Dakota, I really don't know much about. Mike Rounds and John Thune. That I've heard some things from Rounds, I guess, but
yeah, I'm not too impressed with either well, I know a little bit about Thune, not much, but I wasn't impressed. And we know what Tester and Booker are. So everything they touch is like turns to crap.
The other point to this specifically is for country of origin labeling, other countries that, at least from what I've been, the minimal amount that I've been able to look into, other countries, they do this. They say, hey, this is from the United States, or this is China, or this is where this beef originated. But we are one of the few that don't. And that's going back to my original point of understanding where your food comes from, being healthy, and trying to make a educated decision and understanding of where you're getting your sustenance. I don't understand why we allow other countries to do it, and I'd love to see what the World Trade Organization has to say about this. Why other countries are able to do it, but the United States for some reason cannot.
Well, and let's face it, it doesn't matter whether something's labeled or not. If you have a beef product or pork or lamb, chicken, doesn't matter. Let's say you have a product that says made in the USA, raised, slaughtered, packaged in the USA. No,
that's exception. Another thing. I wouldn't mind a mixed label where it said raised in New Zealand, slaughtered and packaged in, I don't know, let's say China. And then
wouldn't that be like truth in advertising?
Yeah, it actually would be. But if you had that on the label, the three things, you know, this is where it was, and this is where it was sold, all this stuff, that would be really beneficial. Oh, okay. So I know where this food, this particular animal came from this location, went here, got packaged, and was brought to me in middle of small town USA. Okay, cool. I can make a decision off of that.
No, and people are going to make those decisions like that, but most of them will make those decisions based on what the price of it is. So if you have something that's in a safe, created, you know, it's raised here, it's packaged here, everything is done in the U.S. and it's worth a little bit more because you know that it's not from Namibia, and it's going to cost you more. People are going to go, yeah, I'd like to have that, but you know, I just really can't afford it right now. And they're going to buy the package of hot dog or whatever that's imported from, or the ground beef burger, because that's kind of the universal staple of, it's the pasta of the meat world, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to buy whatever's the cheapest they can find, and that's where Walmart, you know, for instance, is going to make their money. People are going to do that partly because that's what they can afford. Others are going to be, you know what, I am not going to eat this, but I am going to spend a little extra money, and I know I'm going to have a good source of safe beef. So I think money is going to drive a lot of that, which brings us to the other portion of our what we always talk about, and that's why is the cost of beef so high across the counter. But a different thing, but that's what people are going to buy or not buy at all.
Yeah,
it's money.
I want to say, because I've seen a lot of things where people they say I'll pay a little bit more for American stuff because I know it's supporting my people, either my local community, my state, or my region, or maybe even just the country in general. I know it's supporting the United States because a lot of the times what we get concerned about, especially when it comes to presidential elections, are unemployment, economy, like that just ties right back into, hey, I am supplying somebody's paycheck with this pound of beef that I'm buying, or I am helping stimulate my economy by buying my country's stuff. So I want to say probably more people will buy American stuff, but I also understand the same thing. But that's why I would say origin of labeling is great because it explains exactly where it came from. And hey, you want to, all right, Packers, you want to do this? Fine, go for it. Knock down the price a little bit for the Namibian beef and the New Zealand beef or whatever, and bring up that American price a little bit more. If you can go even higher, which I'm sure you guys can, and see what happens. If the non-domestic stuff starts to tank, then here's an idea. Stop bringing it in the United States. I would love nothing more then
Well,
you guys
if
just
it starts to tank, that's going to happen on its own.
Yeah,
It's going to self-regulate.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and the problem is this country of origin labeling, like they have it and have had it in the past, is nothing more than a smokescreen to bring in foreign beef that is then labeled as American beef when it's truly not. That's why I say you got to look at the loopholes. Look at what they're not saying that you can do or that you can't do. They're not regulating it that way. And you know, that's one of the things we do is we regulate trade across international boundaries. That's not something the states do. It's not their purpose. That is the U.S. The federal government. But when the federal government is again causing a conflict of, oh geez, I can't even find out where the stuff is from. It says American made or country of origin labeling is here. Yeah, the label was stuck on it once it crossed the border from wherever. That's the problem, and that always has been the problem. And so bringing that, having no labeling, we know that anything is there. So people want some labeling now. It's like, okay, we'll put the labeling on, and you're still not going to know where the hell it's from. What's the difference? You just suck a tag on it.
Right.
So again, it's more kabuki theater from our friends.
So really, the main issue with that, though, you said, is that a lot of the times, we'll just say Canada because it's our neighboring state. It's the easiest way to explain it. They were to put it on a cattle truck. They already been slaughtered. Right. Yeah. Already been slaughtered. It's in a carcass. It's a carcass and a reefer truck, and they drive across the border to a meat packing plant in, let's say, South Dakota. And those guys then take that meat and they process it, as in they make the cuts, they put it into wrapping and whatnot, and then they label it. And because all of the actual cutting occurred, the cutting and processing actually occurred at the United States, that's where it gets labeled as American beef, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
What other loopholes have there been? Is that really the only one?
No, that's the major one. But how many? Because that allows foreign beef to be transported over a long distance. You know, they can put it into it's called boxed beef.
Right.
You know, they're cutting it into quarters, larger portions to be further processed later on. They put it basically in a box, stick it on a ship in a refrigerated or frozen type ship, bring it over here, unload it, send it to your stores, your Costco's, your Albertsons, Kroger's, wherever, where they have if they have a place to be able to further cut it at that level where it's ready for public consumption. And you can see there's plenty of places still that have butcher shops in the back, and you can see them behind the glass. They're back there and they're cutting meat like crazy, putting it out on the counter. That can then be labeled American beef. How many in our country, because we are so close to Canada, how many pot loads of cattle you see going up and down the road right past our place?
Oh, constantly.
From Canada, live cattle. They're flooding our markets with their cattle. It's exactly the same thing. Now that as soon as it crosses the border and they dump them out into an auction yard somewhere, or they go to a stocker cattle place for, you know, further 400 or 500 pound increase in weight on grass and then finish, now they're American beef. Same thing. So they're doing it both ways.
Now there's another
how
part.
Far away it is.
There's another part to that, though, that you're bringing up a good point, because it relates to the grain story you said. I don't understand why other nations are selling in our nation. I can understand if we had buyers from the United States going to them. You know, we had a scouter or somebody on a TV, like we've seen in auctions with cattle, where somebody's sitting on that back end of a computer and saying, yeah, bid for me, or don't, I'm calling it off. I can see where, you know, we're exporting our scouts, our bidders, whoever, to other nations to buy and then bring it to us. But why are other nations allowed to bring their products into our country to sell? That shouldn't be an issue. That should not be a problem whatsoever. It should be only sold in their nation and then imported if requested.
Yeah, that would be the normal type of trade agreement, right? That you would think. How does that work with coffee beans? We don't make a hell of a lot of coffee in the US, right?
No.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, you know, so how does that work? we get our coffee from other places, typically Central South America.
Yeah.
And there's some other places in the world that
you could say
coffee.
places like Puerto Rico and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which are territories of the United States, but
a little different thing, but still, you know, and it's what you said before. Okay, I don't mind trading for something if we don't have it. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Well, you should take care of your country first. Well, when you have these trade imbalances, and to me it's a trade imbalance. When you have a foreign country like Canada that's able to come in, bring those animals across the border, and truckload after truckload after truckload, and dump them on our markets, would you, if you was a Canadian? That's part of our trade problem right there.
Yeah.
And that's our North American Free Trade Agreement. That was what NAFTA did, and just dumped their lumber, their cattle, and their grain on our markets, and just tanked us here in the early 90s.
See, and I don't know if that would be, I don't know how beneficial that'd be to Canada anyway, because that's the thing is the fact
it's an open market.
Yeah, but when you go to flood another market and you bring prices down as much as you do, how does that assist you? Because you're selling stuff at a reduced price. You're not making as much money either.
Volume.
Okay.
One's volume. One's volume, and one's the market. You know, who you selling to.
Right.
How populous is Canada?
Western
compared to the US?
I have no idea.
It's pretty sparse.
Let's Google it, because I got the Google machine here.
But Google can tell you. Western Canada is fairly sparse.
Well, yeah, it's a lot like. So it says the current population of Canada is 38 million. That's interesting. That's like 10%. That's like 10% of the United States.
What's the land mass size? Compared to the US?
Land mass, I don't know.
Not all of that is habitable. Obviously,
well, no, you know, I'm not even going to worry about that. But yeah, so, no.
But it is not. Let's put it this way: if you got 1/10 the size of the U.S. in populace, the land mass is not 1/10 the size of the U.S. It's not proportional.
Oh, you're saying like usable land mass?
Right.
Well, so, yeah, because Alaska throws everything for a loop. Everybody thinks it's like the size of Montana or Texas, but even though it's number one, no, it's like all of the United States.
Right. Yeah.
Alaska is massive, but also with Alaska, it's not as inhabitable either.
There you go. Yeah. So you kind of wash Alaska out of that, you know, because it's not that habitable, not that many people, and the area in which is set for agronomy, it's not that great. There's some, you know, the coastal areas, there's some areas that are, but
it's very seasonal.
Right. But like you look at Canada, look at southern Canada, and those are enormous, big plots of ground like we have, and they're full of grain and they're full of cattle. They're doing what we're doing. And we're just opening up the market, giving them an outlet.
Yeah. The other thing too is that I had it here. We're talking origin of labeling because people need to know where their food comes from. I think Americans tend to assume all beef is American beef.
Right. And that's very true.
And that's the problem as well, is everybody looks at a burger or they look at a steak and they go, oh, it's the cattlemen. They're making all the money because, first of all, the Packers. Yes, I slipped that in there. Again, it's the Packers. We as the cattle producers make a little bit, but it's the Packers who are.
You hope we make a little bit. We hope we break even.
Yeah, we didn't last year. We're gonna see what happens this year. Probably not.
Probably not.
But the thing is, everybody looks at that meat and they go, "Oh, those cattle, those cattlemen, cattle women, they're killing us on these prices." And again, that assumption that it's all American beef and it's all going into American pockets, that's not true. And that's why I think origin labeling would be great, because when people start to look at their beef, we're talking beef because they only have beef in this bill, or this amendment is what I should say. they have beef only in that. They don't have lamb, they don't have hogs, but it would be great if somebody could go up to a meat counter, look at all the meat and go, oh, yep, this is not what I thought it was. And they'd see all the countries. It'd be like, oh, this is Costa Rica. Oh, this is Brazil. Oh, this is Chile. Oh, this is Honduras. Where's the American beef? They might actually sit there and not find any, which would be crazy, but it's very high potential that you could go up to that meat counter and not see American beef whatsoever and be, oh, okay, now I kind of have an understanding of where my money's actually going, first of all, and second, what is actually happening with the meat industry and the meat food chain.
Yeah, provided that labeling is accurate.
Also,
part of my point, right?
Yeah,
keep coming back to that because we've been burned by that before.
Yeah,
it's a huge burner. The other part of that is, I think there is a tendency, it's human nature, to think, okay, yeah, it says that my label says it's American beef. Okay, must be great. I'm glad. I'm good to go, and never even question it.
Well,
because it says it's a label. Oh, it's good, which is not necessarily their fault because, again, the accuracy in what's put on there is something. Now, the only thing that I want to kind of go back to your point about most people think that beef here is American beef, and that's true. I think that's probably an accurate misnomer, with the exception of those that are touted as not American beef, like Wagyu.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Where it's a specialty type breed, or Kobe beef, where it's like, oh yeah, this thing's been fed beer, the tailings of the beer making process, and it gets massaged every day. This is no wonder it's high priced. This is why. Well,
which does that even help with the flavor? Like, does it actually? Like,
well, I mean, cattle can eat all kinds of things from distillers grains. That's a big deal. Sure. Beet pulp, distillers grain. There's why not? They get enough of it, and you have a balance of it. You're really just using some of those proteins in that for the fermentation process to make alcohol. Your yeast is breaking it down, but there's still some there.
That's fair.
The whole thing is what else is fed with it, and then why is it that they're moving and massaging these animals? That's because they're not out roaming around. They got to maintain some muscle tone. It's not for the pleasure of the animal. They're not being babied. They're moving around muscle tone. So that's also why it's tender.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But again, I think you talked about it briefly, that misnomer. I think the important part, if people, again, assuming the label is correct and everything like that, they see American beef, they'd be like, oh, yep, perfect, good. But if they were to label the way that we actually just talked about a little bit ago, where it said raised, slaughtered, processed, those three big ones, that would help, because then you could say, oh yeah, it was processed in the United States, so the processing is probably pretty clean. We're probably going to be fine. It's going to be healthy in that term. But it was raised in Brazil. Oh, I know Brazil's had some mad cow recently. Maybe I don't want this beef. And so if somebody looked at that label, made it very, I don't know, bottom left corner. I always think bottom left corner. That would make it really easy to see and go, oh, okay, raised in Brazil, processed and slaughtered in the United States. And you can just have all three: raised, slaughtered, and processed, and go Brazil, US, and go, oh, okay, maybe not. And just that in itself, I think, would be helpful. But again, we have to have those labels be accurate, and it has to be no loopholes in how people apply that term.
Yeah, I think that's only a partial fix. I think it would be a good one, as long as it was accurate. Then that's what that's for. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people then have to be tuned in to start looking at your food again. I think most people are very complacent about where their food comes from because it has been so safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've taken their eye off that and go, yeah, I don't have to worry about this. This is something I don't have to even pay attention to. But if you were to walk up to 10 people on the street right now and ask them about Brazilian beef and how safe it is and how safe it's been in the last year, how many of them could tell you that Brazil just had an outbreak of mad cow disease.
I don't think any could.
No, we got somebody I was with this last week, spent some time with, and at another venue, and we were talking about these very things because she's all about trying to help us market and the beef industry in general and local and the whole works. And I explained to her, I said, Brazil just had this outbreak of mad cow. China shut down the imports. The US didn't. She's like, what? Completely by surprise. So I think we are again, we're an echo chamber of information in as well. It's directed only where we find it. That's not normally put on the regular nightly news.
Well, that's the hard part too. Is I mean, we've had this discussion multiple times as well. The ag community is horrible about sharing outside of it, because I think it also goes back to the division that you've also explained at the beginning of this. Was with things being as divisive as they are with racial and socioeconomic, we're also very much divided on who's in rural areas and who's in urban areas. And because of that, agriculture in itself is rural. We don't reach out to those who we should be. Our consumers, the worst business model ever. Don't connect with your consumers whatsoever. And somehow we've managed to do it for 150 years.
Well, it's because we've allowed the outlet. Again, why did Chicago even become into existence? What was the biggest deal about Chicago?
It was meat packing, because the railroad allowed for the cattle to be transported from Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, all the way up to the meat packers in Illinois, and then they would then distribute from there.
Right. So it's very difficult, as we haven't explained this well enough. And that was one of the things I was talking to a friend of ours about, was why don't you just do what some of these people do in the farmers markets, where they have their animals right there, and they can sell it directly to the consumer, raw meats, which there's a lot of regulation around that, a ton of regulation. And that's all well and fine. And you can do that with chickens, maybe some goat. It's a lot easier to do that with them than it is with cattle. Cattle is it is a very time consuming, expert type of trade to do. It's not just something that anybody can do. And when you are doing that part of it, now what else are you not able to do with the rest of your herd? And that's manage it.
Right.
So, and then it takes much more ground, it takes much more infrastructure to be able to do that, which it blows people's minds. I think they just don't understand. And then you have every producer does things slightly differently. Based on, again, we've talked about assets, whether your water, your ground, how that's all put together, how much of it you've got, quality of it. So the local market is a great idea. I love that. We've had many more local butcher shops open up, and some larger ones as well that have quit doing custom cut, and they cut for restaurants or for production supply in a particular set of grocery stores, for instance, or market some of their products. So we've allowed that to happen because of the convenience and the ability to not do all of it in large scale. So because of the size of the animals we deal with. Chickens, there's plenty of places that can do that. But again, it still takes more people and takes some expertise in which to make that happen, which then enlarges your ability to sell. But then you got to get out there and sell. Then you got to get that stuff to the people as well, because people aren't going to come to your place and buy it necessarily. So there's all that. So yeah, we've taken our eye off of that. We've allowed that to happen, but it's basically like an assembly line type of operation where you're turning that over to someone else to take it to the next stage. And then like us, we're not finishing beef. We sell that to people who then put it on grass for a little bit, generally, and then finish it. Then it goes to the slaughter plant, and then it is cut up and sent to the consumer. So there's a minimum of 4-step process, or minimum, and there's probably more than that, really.
Now, the other thing too, we've got about 10 minutes. every time we keep going back to the labeling part, we talked about, a great step forward would be the big three: where it was raised, where it was slaughtered, and where it was packaged, packaged/processed. But the other thing would be, you keep harping on the point, and I think it's important to talk about is whether or not that label is even accurate in the first place. There's loopholes, things bringing it around and whatnot. But the other thing too is, let's say everything has been, everybody's abided by it, or everybody in the process has said, yep, we want to make sure to report this is a Canadian cow. It was raised and slaughtered in Canada. It was brought to the United States and packaged. Everybody in the process said, yep, we've verified all these things. It's going to be correct. But then when it comes to actually printing and placing the label, it's not labeled correctly. And by a malignant individual, just one individual, that's all it has to be, has decided we're going to put American on all of it. How do you fix that issue? Because I think that's what you've also been trying to allude to as well, without kind of explaining the process. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to potentially.
Because again, human nature. If you've got somebody who's unscrupulous and they're going to be able to have an edge on a market and a larger market just by putting a label on it that's not, forthright or not honest, but it's going to help them, they're going to do it. And I think what else do we do on any kind of, let's say that you do something and you in the way of using your cell phone illegally, and you are talking to someone in another country on your cell phone for some illegal means. What's going to happen to you?
I would imagine some sort of fine at minimum, and probably facing some sort of prison penalty. I'm not sure what.
Right. And the more you do that, the more egregious it is to the government, meaning it's on a wire fraud or international. Whenever you cross those boundaries doing that, then they absolutely go nuts, and you may never see the light of day again, depending on who you are. And the same thing could happen there. Where are they? What are they doing? Doesn't matter whether they're, let's say you got somebody in the US that is bringing that beef in, and they're putting a different label on it, or they're mislabeling it purposely for that fraudulent purpose. It doesn't matter what country they're in, where they're doing it, they're still doing it, and it's still for the same fraudulent purpose. And you could actually absolutely destroy somebody, their life, their choice, but you could also shut down that industry in that country as well. I mean, you got some big hooks that you could potentially use to keep people honest. So, I mean, that's not an issue. It's a matter of whether or not you've got there are politicians, and let's face it, that's who's running this, is our politicians are running our trades, and right through, it's not at the local level, it's not through the state level, it's at the federal level. Those are federal gates that these vehicles are driving through, and from one country into here, whether it's north or south border doesn't matter. They're controlled federally, and so they have the ability to do that. They have the ability to keep it honest, but they also have the ability to let things slide too. And that's where I have a huge distrust. I think this is nothing more than a smokescreen for political purposes again anyway. Most things are. When you look at the politics or the politicians getting involved for something, it is not for our benefit. It is for their own benefit, to stay in power, to keep being able to do these deals, side deals, under the table deals, or at the very least, let's say they are the most honest person in the world. They're going to do that to keep themselves in power. Show me a politician and I'll show you somebody with an ego.
Yeah. I think that the other thing too is, I would love to see, at first I was excited about this, the country of origin labeling, but then when I started realizing it's more of an amendment, it's not an actual act, it's not going to have much substance to it. Because the other thing too, I did not mention, but it's in here, is after it's enacted or voted yay, they have like a year to actually implement it, and then so much can happen in world affairs within a year. Look at COVID. That, I mean, they could just simply say, "Oh yeah, I guess we're not going to do that," and they just like pull a quick, they pull the rug out from underneath you after that. But the thing is, I saw something recently where when you go to make a law, somebody brought up a point. When you make a law, we have so many laws, they just pile and pile and pile. Instead of making new laws, why don't we repeal completely one and replace it with this one? If it's a newer and better law, that makes sense, but we haven't done that. And that's what I would like to see COOL become. I would like it to, hey, ideally, let's go down this sector, this industry sector. Let's fix it with this blanket law and go from there. Take out everything that's been there in the past. Let's consolidate it, all the good stuff consolidated to one bill, and say, all right, here's our new law, and delete everything else. That'd be great. And I'd love to see COOL be like that, but yeah, it's gonna be very frustrating. I think COOL is not going to be an issue that just gets resolved within the next year or two.
It's going to be an issue of how is it going to be used, not to help us, but to help others and put us out of business even further, make it more difficult to be able to make a product that is sold and marketable here in the U.S.
Well, that's a good point. We talk about meat packers. What's going to happen to the packers when the beef industry implodes, especially in the United States? If it implodes in the United States, where are you going to go?
What does the head of JBS want?
Well, he wants to do plant-based protein anyway. So
right, yeah, they don't care.
All right.
What's going to happen is when people's bellies get hungry, that's when it really comes down to
it. And you start having other health issues because, again, we've said before, beef has nutrients that plants don't, and plants have nutrients beef doesn't. So
yeah, one of the worst things that can happen though if this gets implemented and goes, is then it's turned over to a oversight and a bureaucratic type of structure where they can choose to use the amendments as written, or let some of them slide, and then it's out of control. And you got somebody like the USDA that is going to be in charge of that. And again, you got a huge bureaucracy. If you don't think the USDA is not a huge bureaucracy, they take care of everything from our Forest Service land to giving out food stamps.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's cool. That's the country of origin labeling. The things surrounding that, the many, many, many political figures, policies, agendas, the trade that goes along with COOL, the importance of it, health and personal. With that, I'll give it to Dad.
Well, there ain't a heck of a lot more that I can say that's not going to bring your day down. So sorry to be the guy that always pees on the parade, but I've seen it before. I've listened to it when I was a kid, thinking being all hopeful and everything, and got my hopes dashed, and my grandpa's hopes dashed, and my dad's hopes dashed, and now I'm hoping not to dash your hopes. But for those that are walking along with us and trying to keep track of this, and some that are rooting for us, and even those that are not, we thank you till you're better paid.